Welcome to Spiritual and Sassy, the podcast where we bleed deep soul wisdom with authentic confidence.
We're your host,
Tressa
and Myra, and together we'll explore the mystical side of life, challenge societal norms and programming, and embrace our inner power.
Whether you're on a spiritual journey or just love a little sass, this space is for you.
Let's dive in and light up the world with a little more love.
Hello, we're back.
Hello, we are here.
We are here. We're spry. Now we're actually both a little tired today.
It's rainy here, and it's been real rainy the last several days. So I don't know. It's one of those Sundays where you look outside and you're like, okay, I need rest and a good book and something, a beverage of choice.
Yeah.
I would choose another coffee, but that's not very restful. But yeah, one of those days.
One of those days. We got all our technical issues figured out finally. So it's a little challenging this morning. Well, this afternoon, I guess.
Yeah, it's really hit or miss, but I think it's just teaching us something.
Yeah.
We need to learn techniques.
Yeah.
Yeah. It gave us a second to breathe, maybe, to get ready.
So on last week's episode, we talked about kind of unplugging from our devices. You said you did a pretty good job.
I did. It went a little too hard. I was telling Tressa I promised that I would help upload the rest of the episodes on YouTube as we're learning, like, to get the episodes going and like where we need to put them and how we place our episodes. And I just forgot. I didn't do it at all. And I skipped like 2 whole episodes. So that's not great. So I need to, for our YouTubers, I apologize if you see this. No, I'm sorry. And there are several YouTubers who watch us. I see the statistics.
Yeah.
So we have a small following on the YouTube. And to you YouTubers, I apologize.
We'll get them out there. Yeah.
Yeah. I unplugged too hard.
So was it hard? I did pretty good. I don't want to lie and say I was super successful. I still was on my phone a little too much, more than I would have liked to be. But I did pretty good. I had a pretty good awareness. Like if I started to grab my phone and scroll, I'm like, am I supposed to be doing this? Is this worth your while? So yeah. I did detach more because I brought the awareness to it. But man, it's hard.
It's really hard. I wasn't doing so hot in the beginning. I'm not being fully transparent. Nola looked at me and she said, "Mommy, will you just put your phone down for tonight? Like, can we hang out without your phone? Mm-hmm. And I'll lay here." She wanted me to scratch her back. I'm just going to be honest. But the words were enough.
Yeah.
And I'm like, ooh, yeah.
Yeah.
So it helped me. That motivated me a little more than I think I was originally ready to take on. But I didn't have my phone. And honestly, we talk about like the endorphins and the rush. I'm not even really scrolling on social media. I'm online shopping, but I'm abandoning the carts. I'm not even buying. And so when we did last week's episode, it made me really think, like, what am I even doing on the phone? And do I even need these things? And so, like I mentioned before we started, I'm going on a beach trip, and so I've been going through and inventorying what we've got and what we don't have, especially since we moved, and making sure the kids have swimsuits that are the right size and
right.
All those things. And, so I decided I wanted to purchase something with an intention, like, okay, this is for the trip. These are things do we need them? Maybe, some of it was necessary or whatever. But once I did that, I made the purchase and then I said, okay, I'm great. I have everything that I need. I have everything that I need in this moment. All is well. And I put my phone down and it's been good. It's been good. But that was mostly what I was doing, abandoning shopping carts. I don't know what the point of that is, but I'm really great at that. That's a secret Olympic skill, my party trick. I'm wonderful at making $1,000 shopping carts and abandoning all of them.
I do that too, but that's part of it, right? Like I'll be fed an ad, on Instagram and then pretty soon I've like looked at Free People's site and I have 5 things in my cart and I'm like, I'm not going to buy any of this. What am I doing?
Yeah.
An hour later. But I've done better, and I've been trying to like take my dog for walks at night and also the weather's getting better and it's lighter out, so you have more opportunity to be out in nature. Yesterday though, I did really good. We went to see Troy's parents for a little bit, and then we went to dinner with some friends, and then hung out with them, and I didn't touch I left my phone in the car for like 6 hours, 7 hours.
Well,
Didn't
that's
touch it.
awesome.
It was
That's
great.
really good.
Yeah.
See?
Oh,
That's good though. That's
yeah,
great.
it was
I love
great.
it. Yeah. We went on a walk yesterday and we went to like a normal park, like a walking park, and I've been there a million times. And it's honestly where everyone goes and takes prom pictures.
Mm-hmm.
And it was really fun to go back with my family that's never been before. And for them, everything was new, and it's beautiful. It's a beautiful park. I mean, I couldn't believe how pretty it still is and how well it's maintained. And it was just so much fun because I got to look at it through different eyes, and see how beautiful the park really is. And there's animals everywhere. You've got insects and butterflies and bees humming and everything. And then when we started on the walk, we saw this is fish people, fishers of men that are out there. Please don't judge me here, but I'm pretty sure it was carp. I'm pretty sure. I don't really know. I'm assuming it was a carp of some sort.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it was massive. I mean, it was the
Mm-hmm.
size of Magnolia. It would have swallowed her whole. And they are just hanging out in this pond, so we could see them, which was cool. And then we like turned a corner, and then 14 turtles just launch off the bank and go swimming around
Wow.
into the
That's
water. I
cool.
know Blake was like, "What
Very
the?"
cool.
And I'm like, "Yeah,
Yeah.
that's cool." And then we go and there's ducks sleeping under trees, a family of ducks. I don't even know what you call multiple ducks. Are they more than one? Duckies? I don't know.
Duckies. That's what I was thinking to say. Duckies.
And
A
yeah,
ducky
so these
family. All
cute
right.
ducks, yeah. And then we watched other ducks swimming and bobbing and eating and cleaning themselves. And then there's geese, and like everywhere we went, there was a new animal of some sort, and creature. And it was just really cool. And everyone's so excited. And, we're walking and we go into this like little secluded area, and there was only one little duck. And Draco loves ducks right now. And so all of a sudden the duck saw us and it swam. I mean, it just beelined to us. And we said, "Hello, duck. How are you today?" And he went quack and turned around and swam right back. So I'm like, I don't know what's going on, folks. So, and then my butterfly posed. I mean, I felt like Snow White, I'm like,
I love
wow.
that. That's
So
great.
that
Nature
was
was
my,
talking to you.
yeah, it was nice. So it was a good day,
Yeah.
to wrap up the unplugging and nature and spring. So
Yeah. I'm going to keep working on it. Keep being
I got to
aware
keep working
for
on it.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, well, we'd love to hear from our listeners how they did with their unplugging from devices for the week too. So,
Yes.
but today we're going to talk about karma, the big
Karma.
buzzword karma.
Karma, yes, as made famous recently by Taylor Swift. There's the Karma song that's
Oh,
everywhere. Honestly, that came to
okay.
mind because that's all Nola sings. And it's like
Yeah.
Karma is a cat purring in my lap. And I like that just like buzzes in my head.
That's
But
part of
anyway,
her song.
yeah, there's a
Okay.
whole thing. Yeah. Karma's my boyfriend. Yeah. A
Yeah.
whole thing. There's a whole list of
Gotcha.
things, but that's not where we're going today. No Taylor
Maybe.
Swift.
You never know.
Maybe. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's the law of karma. I think it's actually called what I've studied is the law of balance, because that's ultimately what karma is, meaning that
Hmm.
everything has to balance at some point, right? And I believe personally that our soul's energy is eternal. And so we're in this lifetime right now as Myra and Tressa, but there could be karmic balancing that's happening that is something maybe from several lifetimes ago.
Hmm.
So it's basically that the theory of what you put out, you get back, which is true.
Hmm.
But it's a complex topic to think about because so often when something's happening in our world and it's not comfortable, instead of trying to understand what is this, how is this serving me, what is balancing here, we can so easily go into that victim mentality of why is this happening to me? You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Yeah.
Yep. And, going along those lines, like karma comes back to you with whatever you put out, good or bad. And it can come back in a negative or positive form. And so it goes back to what you're saying, like whether you put out something good and you do good, but if and it matters with your intention. If I do something with a negative intention, then, there's a saying, you reap what you sow. I mean, in layman's terms, that's the theory of karma, with a more of a, I guess, a colloquial saying, thinking about it in that light.
Oh, yeah, that's exactly what it is. I mean, karma's taught in many different ways. You reap what you sow is
Hmm.
exactly that, right? And you're right. Like, what is the intention behind it? Because I think it always comes back to intention. I've done things where maybe I've even been in service to somebody,
Hmm.
and this is back when I was much younger, but
Hmm.
my intention wasn't there. It was more of like requirement that I
Hmm.
had to do it, right? That's different than if you're in service because your heart tells you to be in service and you truly just want to be in service to that person, situation, whatever it is, just because you feel drawn to do it, right?
Hmm.
There's no ego play in there. You don't expect
Yeah.
something in return. You're not doing it because you want to have a certain appearance behind it, those kind of things. So thinking about your intention is huge. It was kind of like what you were just talking to me before we started to record, kind of around money, right? And you've been
Hmm.
working on money. And it was interesting because one of the concepts that you talked about was being willing to lose money. Are you okay with
Yep.
losing money, right? Well, money's just in a sense energy, right? But it's
Hmm.
the intention around your money.
Yep.
When you're paying for something, how do you feel about it? Do you feel good?
Hmm. Hmm.
Do you feel stressed? Do you feel, or when you're receiving it, do you feel worthy? A lot of people struggle with money because they lack worthiness. So,
Yeah, because that's, we were chatting and like part of what I've been working on this week was, thoughts and feelings around money. And, we talked last week on the episode about generational cycles and trying to break those cycles and what does that look like. And, I've done a lot of healing and work, but I can always do more. And something that I was really trying to get to the root of it and really get into my subconscious around money specifically this week and really look at I did some shadow work where I confronted those shadows and that person and that shadow that is me or was me I should say because I released it, I let it go and I thanked it for what it did and I sent love through to that shadow and then I released it this week. I've been working on a lot of things in my subconscious and I'm glad you brought that up because I was thinking too, intention even around like giving family members money. Like for example, I am I giving people money because I want to. Sometimes I don't. And I've been in those experiences where I don't really want to do it, but I feel like I need to. And that is a negative intention and that it's blocking. That's blocking me from receiving for one. And for two, I'm not in a true flow of money and it's not in a good balance. Same thing like with karma, and what we're talking about here is my intention of giving money to gloat to be like, look what I have and I can do this and somebody can't buy you this, but I can? Or is it because we feel obligated to because that's still not a positive intention? Or is it just because I want to? Like I love you and I want to buy this for you or I would love to give you this money or what does it look like? And so, really thinking about the intention behind our actions opens up a lot of awareness and the flow of what we are really doing and what we're really putting out there for people and putting out there of ourselves. And I've addressed a lot of those things this week. I've been addressing these things, but part of my intention for the week was to really look and to reflect about this situation specifically. And, I've shared that with Tressa before. Ultimately, my goal is to break generational cycles around money. That's something that I'm working on. And I want to do that. I want to create generational wealth. And I even asked my mom, like, what are your feelings around money? Or why do you think this? Or
mhm,
like even my grandmother, what are your feelings around money? To really kind of address things that I wasn't seeing.
mhm. Yeah.
And the other day, so I work for a finance blog and I wrote copy, which is messaging for those that don't know what copy is. And in 2 days, 38 people signed up for that credit card. And the whole point of the finance website is to help people make extra money or to get financial literacy or to break out of the cycles or, can you make money here? Or there could be a great credit card where you get more lower interest or whatever, etc. Right. And just like any company, I'm trying to sell but it's what it is and it worked. It actually worked and they've never had that record before and I was really proud of that. I'm like, that's so cool, like I can write copy still. Yay. I'm like, I can still do my job. I know how to sell, I guess. Anyways, But my mom was like, "Why would anybody want to get credit cards? That is awful. That is so bad." And then it made me I started feeling guilty for a second. Like, "Oh my God, you're right. Like that's why would I ever want that?" And then I'm like, "Whoa, whoa, 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 no, no, no. This is part of that unconscious, subconscious, not unconscious, sorry,
Hmm.
subconscious awareness or thoughts that I have in my mind around credit cards are bad. It goes back to money is evil or credit cards are cause debt and da da da." That's just thoughts. Those are just thoughts and those are feelings and thoughts like my mom immediately went to. And then I started kind of thinking those things and I had to start cutting those cords. I had to really sit there for a second and visualize because I've been working on it. I'm like, I had to genuinely start cutting cords, visualizing me cutting those out of my because I don't want to go back into that thought pattern. And there's nothing wrong with a credit card. Credit cards are good and credit cards can help and credit cards can do things. It's how the intention behind the credit card.
Hmm.
And so these are some of those things, like that I can see even resurfacing now with a lot of my awareness around these topics and these feelings.
So, yeah, I think money is an interesting topic for most of us, right?
Hmm.
And how do you feel that, like, one of your goals, and you just talked about this, was to change like the generational, not that your family was poor, but you want to change the generational patterning to have like more wealth. Where do you feel like, how do you feel like that connects to the karma specifically for you or your ancestors? Oh, that was for a minute.
Can you see me now? Yeah, no, it just did a crazy thing. Yeah, so I feel like ancestrally there are patterns of, especially if you just go back several generations,
Hmm.
a lot of my family members grew up without anything at
Yeah.
all. I mean, without anything. But the way they made money was through bootlegging, for example. They would bootleg, they would run liquor when it was
Mm-hmm.
outlawed. So, right there, they were doing something
Interesting.
that was unlawful to
Hmm.
generate money to help provide for their family. So, there was already guilt and shame around money just to begin with. So, not only did they not have money, but
Hmm.
the way they were bringing in the income source, they were experiencing guilt and shame. And so even when my nanny is what I call my grandmother, when her mother passed away, she looked at my nanny on her deathbed and said, "Do you think the Lord will forgive me for what I had to do to provide?" And so like even in her final moments, she was still felt guilty that and they had a lot of Christian beliefs or they were very,
Hmm.
active in the Christian faith. And so they didn't even believe in alcohol, or at least her mother didn't. Her dad, that's a different story. But she didn't even believe in it and believe
Yeah.
that it was acceptable to partake. But she
Hmm.
chose to run it to provide for her daughters. There were one of six girls. And like they bathed in wash tubs, like bath, like 10 tubs outside. They had one pair of shoes, you think that's the situation, but they were always happy. Like they had joy in each other. But if that's only 3 generations back, and I can pinpoint it there. And
Yeah.
then if I look even on my father's side, similar situation,
Hmm.
even just my dad in general. And then I can go back and look and then find a place where there's in my family line that there was money, but how they got the money isn't as socially acceptable either. And so I think there's just a lot of shame and guilt. I think that's really it. And
Yeah.
so there's some of those karmic cycles around it and really trying to break those. And I've really been trying to figure out, and, I think that's a good question too. I wrote it down before we started. Like, how do you break karmic cycles? How do you release or remove that karmic debt from you, even in a past life or a current life or whatever it is? How do you, erase it, move on from it, let it go, release it so that you can move forward and get past any of that karmic debt?
I think the key to it is becoming aware of it, right? So, for example, I really hadn't thought of karma until the last few years, and I've studied a lot about it. But in my family history, in this lifetime, I've had a lot of suicide. So it was really interesting. Actually, it started before my father. I was in fifth or sixth grade, and I had this group of friends. And one of our friends' dad, her name was Maria, hung himself. And that was so impactful for me. And I didn't even, I mean, I knew him, but
Mhm.
I'll never forget how impactful that was for me. And I didn't understand it at the time. And then fast forward to, me turning, I was turning 14. In fact, it was right around my birthday. He died. I'm July 13th. My dad committed suicide on the 15th. Then that happened, right? So
Mhm.
I'm having the exact same situation that my friend had. And I just remember at that, fifth, sixth grade age, how this is tragic. Like it
Mhm.
impacted me so much. And then this family that I became very, very close to, they're like my family. My dad was 32 years old when he committed suicide. This family, their son committed suicide at 32 as well, right? I'd been very involved with them. Then fast forward to another 4 years later, the father of that same family committed suicide, something I couldn't have ever imagined. So I remember having a conversation with my mom one day, and she actually said to me, there's karmic energy around this suicide theme in your life. And I was like, yeah, there is. Like, what is that? Right. So, about 6 months, 8 months ago, I don't know how long ago, I did a long meditation around it. And in the meditation, I was shown this is karmic balancing for me. Because in another lifetime, I was a mother of 3 children and I committed suicide in that lifetime. And my guides were showing me this very plainly in this meditation. And when I came out of that meditation, I had such huge gratitude to these people, my father, Jody, and Don.
Mhm.
They helped me balance this karma. I had to experience this energy that I put out at some point. So in really, it's a blessing for me. They had to help me balance that karma. And I truly believe that now that I'm aware of it and I have such gratitude for it, not anger, not
Mhm.
resentment, not how
Mhm.
could you, the patterning is now going to be cleared for me, right?
Mhm.
Unless I choose to do something like that again. You always have
Yeah.
free will. But, that was really profound. And that's a deep karmic energy, right? And their karma, the way they show me patterns in energy work when I do energy work, they were giving me a gift, but there was also something on their journey too. It's more
Yeah.
complex than just one to one. But
Yeah, for sure.
yeah, that was a deep one. But even every little thing that happens to us is somehow a reflection of ourselves, right? That
Mhm.
was that was a reflection of me, not in this lifetime, but several lifetimes ago, and it just took a long time for me to understand it because I had never really dove into it. So, I think that that's how you clear it. You become really really aware, and usually it's always through contrast, right?
Contrast.
Especially when you're dealing with this deeper energies of trauma, right?
Yeah, no, that thank you for sharing that.
Hmm.
I really like what you're saying around awareness because ultimately, we talk about awareness almost on every episode. And ultimately, that's what it is. It's recognizing these things and then changing the way you view it. You said, okay, now I give these people gratitude. I'm not angry anymore. You're changing the frequency of the way you perceive this too. Now you're sending love. Like, okay, I love you. Now I understand. I give you gratitude. I'm sending you hope, love, light. And it's a complete different feeling for you now too. You're putting out completely different energy around this subject and around suicide in general because you've now changed your thought pattern around it is also.
Yeah, and I just look at that. Like universe gives you everything you need. God, the universe, whatever
Exactly.
you want to call it, right? This started at what, 10 years old,
Mhm.
right? The God started to give me signs right then. Now it's
Mhm.
up to me to recognize them. I
Yeah.
could be in victim energy the rest of my life if I choose and just feel sorry
Mhm.
for myself. Well, guess what, sister? You don't graduate, so you can pass away, but guess what? You get to come back and you're going
Yeah.
to have to balance the karma at some point. You don't get out of karma. You don't. It's never going, you have to figure it will always have to balance. That's when I think about God, I think about nature and I think about the balance that nature has naturally.
Mhm.
Right? Like I think that is what God's energy is here to help us do is to stay in harmony and balance, right? And karma is part of what we call karma is part of that.
Yep.
But you can't run from it. Well, you can, just can't outrun it, I guess. You know?
Yeah. And I also think too, like we talk about accountability, we talk about awareness, but being responsible. Like, okay, I'm responsible for these actions and these consequences that came from those actions. So I honor this. How do I rise from this? How do I move on? How do I move forward? How do I not stay in that victim energy? And then how can I move forward and then make those changes in my future actions and be responsible from that learning. Like, okay, I've learned this now. Now I know. And now how am I going to take this and move forward instead of just staying in the why me, the what's going on? Why did this have to happen to me? Why can't I move forward? It's
Mhm.
making the actions, being responsible and moving forward.
Yeah, and that's the hard part.
Yep.
Is continuing to take that level of responsibility. I one of the things I try to do, and I'm not perfect at this. Sometimes I get in victim energy too. I'm like,
Hmm.
Jesus Christ, how much? Okay, God, like I'm a strong bitch, but let's calm down.
Yeah.
I can't take anymore. You know what I mean? Like, and you
Mhm.
do kind of start that feeling sorry for yourself. But the more that I find if I do my practices, right? My spiritual, my energy practices, my body practices, because one isn't without the other. You've got to have balance between all three. If I can do that and I keep up on that, I don't tend to go there as much, right? And I can say, okay, this situation really sucked. What is it teaching me? Because the quicker I can learn the lesson, the quicker I can get rid of the contrast, specific type of contrast.
Yeah, I agree. And I think I was listening to something this week too, and it said, like, we've talked before about anxiety. We've talked about having feelings and emotions are okay. And it's okay to be like, shit, this is happening. Like, damn, like, why am I going through this? But I think it's, they said something like, sit maybe 5 seconds, or I don't know, like 2 minutes and just feel. And that's whatever, that's a book, right? They're going to say
Mhm.
things like that. And I get it. But I think ultimately what I took from it was just feel it, like sometimes, and I do get scared and I do have fear. And, I went through a lot of transitions, especially this year and this new year, going through different things. And, I had to be like, you know what? I am afraid of losing money, but how do I stop that? And so I've been working, what am I changing about my affirmations? How am I healing through this? In my meditations daily, what am I doing to release that? And so I started changing things like, I'm not afraid of losing money. And now I'm starting to feel less anxious about those things. And I'm working through those hidden feelings in my subconscious around money to move forward because when like if you look at what all's happened, I knew a position was ending, right? I've talked about this in an episode before. I knew it was ending because I could feel it for months and I didn't want to face the music. And then when it happened, I felt at peace, but then I started going into like, okay, I can do this, but I wasn't in the right mindset to truly move forward. Then I went through that phase. So I had to go through the fear. I lost the money. It happened. Like it did happen. It did,
Mhm.
right? And that was very real. And I
Mhm.
was allowed to be sad. Like I can be sad about that. I can be sad about, we talk about before the grief. This is grief. I had to grieve the money, the number, or
Mhm.
the role, or the whatever, or whatever it is. I had to feel those things. And it was totally cool for me to feel that. Right. And then I had to move forward through these interviews and blah, blah, blah. And then I accepted a position based on my ego. And it wasn't the right role for me. And we'll talk about ego more as we move on through episodes. But I now, because I truly I had to address the fear and the anxiety, right? And so now I'm working in the place and rewiring my code and my mindset to be like, I'm not afraid. The worst in quotations happened. It literally took place
Mhm.
or whatever, in the moment, the worst or whatever I was afraid of happened, right? So what do you do now? And like I'm still alive. I'm still okay and everything's working out. And so it's that true belief. And this is what I've been, I don't want to watch these things continue to happen. And that's where I've been really working on that, like, okay, what has all of this shown me? And then, after I talked to my mom and then as we've been talking and we've been talking about my ancestors and we can go back generations and I'm addressing the shame and the guilt and the fear and all those things that come along with it so that I can release those things to move forward. And then it changes the way I also give, right? This is part of the things like we talked about. What am I putting my money into? What am I giving to people? How am I showing up for others? And what is the intention? And, I part of what I've been listening to was like visualizing, and I'm a visual person. And it was really neat because what I took from it was it said to like you look at your bed and imagine cash or coins or whatever. Because then when you start visualizing these things as energy or what it is, then it starts to change the way you perceive things. And so it's made me think about people too. You know, when I look at my family, I see hearts. Like I've been starting to visualize differently. You know what I mean? Like it
Yeah.
sounds kind of cheesy,
No,
but
I get it. Yeah.
like I've really started changing the way I'm looking. Like, you know, we say I want abundance, I want prosperity, but I look at my home, this is abundance. This is prosperity. I have everything that I need and I'm grateful for that. So going back in the mindset of gratitude, like I am actually breaking those cycles. And it's being aware like you can have the contrast but still have everything you need and what you're grateful for. You know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
I think about this with everything. Like you know, we talked about me losing the child, but then I have a child, you know, and I have two children and I have these beautiful, healthy babies, and I have a child that I may not have had because of what if the other one worked out? You know, like there's all these things. And like you think about your life, I think about, you know, losing my father. And part of the shadow work that I had to do was letting go of losing males in my life. That was something that
Mhm.
went around and came around, you know, when we worked in a session together about that. And so it's ultimately being aware and then changing the way you view things. Like it's not all I want, I want, I want. What do you have? What do you have to give? What is the intention around it? How am I treating my home? How am I treating the people around me? How am I treating my vehicle or whatever? You know what I mean? And it's all energetic and it changes the frequency and the vibrations of what we're putting out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And ultimately, how you treat something else, whether that be your vehicle, another individual,
Hmm.
is a reflection of how you treat yourself
Hmm.
always, because you can never give to somebody else what you don't give to yourself.
Yeah.
And that I just really want people to hear that, right? Because even as a mother,
Hmm.
and I've said this to you before, moms don't like me when I say this at all, but they'll be like, I love my child more than anything. I'm like, that's impossible because you don't love yourself right now. You believe that, but that's not true. And when you truly start to love who you are, then your love shifts for everybody. And
Hmm.
you've kind of felt that. But I
Yeah.
think, what you're talking about, you talked about shame and breaking through some of those things, right? And this is part of specifically around money when I work with people on money. So often it comes back to the sense of worthiness. Am I worthy of this, right? It's like a fear. I had to go through it too. I've come from more poverty lines, right?
Hmm.
And I remember when I started to make a six-figure salary. Oh, that was tough. I almost resisted it, right? Because
Yep.
who am I? Who the hell am
Hmm.
I
Yeah.
to make that money? Who, Tressa? Do you deserve? It was a whole thing, and it opened up a huge onion for me to start to see
Hmm.
shadow of my own worthiness, and now I've worked through a lot of that, right? Why I'm just as worthy as anybody else, and all money is energy. That's it. And I use it for myself, and I use it to serve others when I
Hmm.
know I'm supposed to.
Yep.
And you talked about that a little bit. And one of the things that I've learned is money doesn't solve money problems ever.
Hmm.
If you have somebody who struggles with money, you can give them money all day long. It won't solve their money issue. So
Hmm.
I always try to tune into, if I feel drawn to help somebody, is it giving money? Because that's sometimes the easiest thing that we go to. I'll just
Yeah.
fix it with money. Is
Yep.
it my time? Is it even my place to help this individual? Sometimes it's not. It's
Yeah.
not your space to help them, right? And that's when you feel that energy that you talked about a little bit about obligation and you
Yep.
go into labels, right? But it's my brother or it's my mom or it's this person. And if I don't help, who will? But yet
Hmm.
it's not your place. Every single time I've done something like that, it's never panned out well because you're messing with the flow of the energy lines, right?
Exactly.
You're stepping in when you shouldn't be. And so I just had jotted down a few of those things that I wanted to comment on, that some of the things that you'd said. One of the other things that I've started doing, it's funny you said you're trying to see your family like hard energy.
Yeah.
And yeah, I've been trying to look at people. Do you remember Care Bears?
Yeah.
Do
Yeah.
you? Yeah, like
Yeah. Nola loves
and
them,
the
so
little
we have Care Bears.
rainbows,
Yeah.
So like I've been trying to look at people and like, oh, what's their rainbow look like? What's their, because Care Bears were just like all
Yeah.
love, right?
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah, so that's funny. You've been doing it too. Um,
Yeah, but I mean, like, hey, it's helping me. I hope it helps, you know, I mean, I'm thinking it's helping you, but it's changing the way that I view things. And I really tried, because I'm not perfect, and you know, and we've all done fucked up shit, right?
Oh yeah.
And you know, and I think part of it too is addressing the fucked up shit you've done. Like if you have hurt a person, whether the intention was there or not, you did it. It's going through and having those moments like, hey, you know what? I did this. I am sorry. You know, it's not for me to make you forgive me, but I'm clearing the path. I'm sorry that I did it. You know, and being true with that intention, you know, really truly being sorrowful. Sorrowful, I don't know, words are not coming to me at the moment, but just truly showing the empathy around it, and then also respecting their reaction, because you don't get to dictate their reaction. You don't get to dictate that they accept it or they don't, but you can do your part and address it and say, hey, I'm sorry. And I think that's one of the ways to also clear that karmic debt too, especially in this current lifetime, for those that you may have caused harm to or done wrong to, or the intention just wasn't there, or maybe you weren't intending to hurt them, but it did. And just saying, hey, you know, I love you and I'm sorry and I see this, and that's the way to move forward. And, you know, we talked about on the last episode manifesting. Something I thought about this week was how like I have manifested people to show back up in my life for me to say sorry to. Like I
Mm-hmm.
have totally manifested a partner of mine that I had years ago, and it was very crazy. I was actually, I mean, it was years ago when we dated, but then it was several years ago when they showed back up in my life. And it was so random. They like texted me out of the blue and we had this great conversation. And I said I was sorry. And they said, I'm sorry. And I never heard from them again. But hey,
Wow.
I needed to do
That's
it. And it
awesome.
was,
Yeah.
yeah. And so I think about those things, and like I've seen, and when I see people or I see things or those that are around me, you know, I've really tried to be accountable. Try is a silly word. I can go Yoda here. You can't try, you can only do whatever. But seriously though, you know, I really worked on saying, hey, I'm sorry. Whether it was 10 years ago, I don't care, or whatever it looks like. And really just saying I wasn't cool. It wasn't cool what I did. I wasn't in a healthy space either. It wasn't fair for me. And you know, and I've started to see when I can do that for people, it's showing back up for me too, where people can do that, saying like, hey, this wasn't cool, or hey, you know what, I recognize I own this. And I really do believe I've manifested some of this stuff to come back so that I can address it, they can address it, and we can move forward.
Oh, absolutely. And I completely agree with you. If I don't use the word sorry very often unless I truly feel that I need to be sorry for something. Because so often, my gosh, in the community I live in,
Mm-hmm.
like I see people use sorry like every third word, like they're sorry for existing. I'm like, that's unhealthy. But if I truly feel that I owe somebody an apology, I try to make sure that I apologize without expectation, like what you were talking about. I'm going to apologize for the action that I did that I am not happy with, right? I want to do something different, but I'm not going to be attached to their outcome. They can accept it, not accept it, but it's for me to clear that energy out. It's funny you talked about like how you bring people back into your existence, right? So when I was a teenager, after my dad died, I ended up trying to finish school in Lyman, and I lived with my aunt the last 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And my cousin, I shared a room with my cousin Spring, and I was this bitch. I was just a mean bitch. Like I was. I
Mm-hmm.
have to own it. But she got this chair. She got this chair from her mother. And I hated this chair. I hated it.
Yeah.
It had like flowers on. It was gross for me. And she was such a sweet kid. And I think she probably looked up to me at that time. So I was like, Spring, I will pay you $5 to get rid of that chair. And she did. She got rid of it out of our room. And then guess what I did?
What did you do?
I didn't give her. She's like, okay, where's my $5? And guess what I did, Myra? I said, well, I didn't tell you when I was going to pay it. I
Oh my
mean,
gosh.
I was a mean person because hurt people, right? And I had a lot of
Yeah.
hurt back
Yeah.
then. So fast forward now to me moving back and working on myself and yada yada. So maybe it was 10 years ago or whatever. I'd been talking to Spring again, and I remembered it, and I was like, I am going to pay you this $5. I am so sorry that I was so that that even happened, right? And I had the opportunity to pay my debt and apologize. And um, I don't even know if she remembered it. It seemed insignificant to her in the grand scheme of life, but to me, I needed to clear that energy, right? I was a snot.
No, and that made me think too, like if you feel prompted to clear that energy or to apologize or to address it, whether it was many, many moons ago or whenever, really that's your you telling you that is your consciousness
Hmm.
saying, "Hey, you should do this." Like I really believe on acting on those promptings. And speaking of roommates, I had a roommate my last year's on call or last, I guess, semester. I don't even know. It was kind of like an in between. And um I started dating a guy who was really not great. I'm very good at that. Except Blake. Blake's like the best in the world. But I was having some terrible thoughts and doing some silly things. So anywho, I was dating this guy and I didn't realize at the time that my actions were hurting a person. And I really, I go back and forth with the situation a lot because I feel like, some of it was their own stuff too. Like they needed me in a capacity that I never asked to be needed in either. Like they had an expectation on me and I didn't recognize that in the time. And I didn't recognize that, especially with them and what their needs were. And not that I owed this person anything, but I do believe in acknowledgement, like we've talked about, and saying like, hey, I'm sorry, this is what's going on. I can't do this for you. I can't be this person for you. And years have gone on and I've thought about it and I've thought about this person and really just addressing it and saying like, "Hey, I'm sorry for what happened because I feel like I could have been different in that situation. I could have honored you differently. And we could have also talked about ourselves and our boundaries and our friendship and what was going on in that moment." And, they ended up dropping out of school. And so I felt a lot of guilt around that. I felt like, man, it was our last year, if I could have been that person, if I could have been there for them or do this or do that. And it's kind of been a cloud on my shoulders and things I've thought about for a while. Well, I found out this year that they actually passed away last year. And, I was so hurt and I'm still really hurt about this person, but there's nothing that I can do or say face to face to this person. And honestly, there was a lot going on in their life recently too, or in the last several years that I don't need to know about. It's not for me to know about. And I think maybe I could have been there for them too then, and she passed away so young. Like, who thinks they're going to die from an aneurysm at 28 years old, And I really hate it. I should have acted on those promptings. And, especially now where I'm at in life, I have a lot I could say, but I've worked on that and I can only say what I can in my heart, and hope that they know that and they can hear that and feel that. And I've reached out to their mother, and shared my love of them to her. And, and I really tried to advocate. I feel like maybe even me just sharing that for listeners, that can be a way to help others. You never know, every day is limited. I mean, it is, we live in the moment, and that's something
Hmm.
that I've worked on this week too, is we look so much in the future. Like, I'll save this much money in the future, or I'll tell this person this in the
Hmm.
future, or I'll go to this country in the future, or I'll do this trip or marry this person or whatever. But it's all in the future. We live in the present. And living in the present is one of the highest frequencies too, is just being here, being in the now and doing it now and taking charge of whatever you're trying to do now. If it's something you need to apologize for, if it's something you need to work on or something you want to do for your mind, your body, or your soul, whatever it is, doing it now has so much power in it because we can only be in the present. We can't be in
Hmm.
the past and we can't be in the future. And the more we put timelines out there, then that's when things happen. I hear stories where people say, "Oh, when I retire, I'll do this or do that." Well, they die. They don't retire because they've put it in the future. They put a time limit on it. Or like you hear, well, you will go have a knee replacement and come out in 6 weeks or whatever. They've already put a timeline on it. So we moving out of that thought and that theory, and I could go on and on about that too, but just what I want to say is if you've got things you want to clear, whoever it is, whatever it is, you can take control of that now, and you should do it now because you don't know. You're not guaranteed. And, I've had to really work through how I feel about the whole situation. And then now that the person's not even alive, and that's a whole layer of things, and it's been something that has weighed on me since I found out. And I've really had to work through that, especially recently.
I think a couple of things. One is alive or not. In fact, sometimes it's easier when they're not because you can communicate actually a little bit easier telepathically without this human body if you tune into that. But it's kind of cool because I would reframe this a little bit for you in the fact that she gave you such a blessing, right?
Hmm.
Because you saw what you should have done,
For
right?
sure.
And now, even with her transition, it made it you were even more aware of being more present, acting on your intuition, listening to that and acting on it. She gave you that gift that you
Hmm.
won't ever forget that now,
Yeah, for
right?
sure.
Like you're going to do that the next time. So she gave you the gift of that. And so I just try to find gratitude in that. But also, like, we take on these contracts. That's what I call them. We're taking on
Yeah.
contracts and timelines, right?
Hmm.
And, you use the example of, a knee replacement. And we have our own consciousness, but we're of
Hmm.
one consciousness too. Right. And I was just working with a client about this, and she has had some health issues in the past and is refusing to go back and deal with the medical industry. And I agree with her because sometimes we let these white coats, right? We collectively believe that doctors know best instead
Yeah.
of tuning into ourselves. And then we attach to the timelines that they give us.
Yeah.
That's a contract.
Mhm.
I had a good friend that was diagnosed with ovarian cancer, and literally she told me, the doctors told her most people last 5 years, and she lasted almost to that within a few months of the timeline that he gave her. She took
Wow.
that contract on.
Mhm.
It's like, yeah, 6 weeks. Okay, but maybe my body heals differently. And if I put
Yeah.
more energy into it, maybe it's 4 weeks for me. But we
Hmm.
give our power away all the time by
Hmm.
taking on these contracts, right? And that's kind of what, even going back to that money,
Hmm.
you've got to watch that because this just happened to me yesterday. My mother focuses on cost of everything, right?
Yep.
And as I was having a conversation with her, how much her new fridge just cost, what's this cost at the store, what's that cost at the store. And it's always like around how expensive everything is. And I have to
Hmm.
be really cautious to not take back on those generational contracts,
Hmm.
and we do that all the time with what we're giving out and what we're receiving.
Yep.
So, but all right. Well, this has been great. Any other final thoughts
No, I
before
guess
yeah.
karma is the cat purring in your lap.
Well, it kind of is. I mean, I've
It-
never heard this song, but I get what she's saying. Karma is everything, right? It's
Yep.
everything.
Yep.
And just, I think the challenge is to start to become aware.
Hmm.
And if you could start to go, okay, if this has to be a reflection of something that at some point I've put out. So what am I learning? What do I need to do to balance it? What is start asking those questions and bring your vibration up a little bit out of that victim energy, right? As to, for me, my life's just a pile of shit. This stuff always happens to me. Bring yourself out of that energy and take a few minutes to reflect. This is why, prayer is putting energy out there to ask for help, right? Or what
Yep.
you want to experience. But what we call meditation or sitting in silence gives you the opportunity to hear the answers. Whether
Hmm.
you believe that's from God, from unicorns, from dragons, from your heart, I don't care. But you've got to give yourself that space.
I love it.
Yeah. All right, guys. Well, until next time, keep your vibes way, way, way high.
And stay sassy.